We're here now to show you a little bit about how I go about riveting the spar. So I've gone ahead and laid out the spar, and I have rivet tape holding all of the rivets underneath the spar from the front side. Rivet tape's kind of nice because it will hold your rivet heads. It's not adhesive in the center, it's adhesive on the outer edge. You can use blue tape, but if you rivet on the blue tape, you'll have to peel it off, maybe with some solvent even. Also, or you'll take it. You can put it on each individual rivet and take it off the individual rivets. I go ahead and put rivet tape along the whole bottom, so I'm able to place all of my rivets. It's got everything pinned in place this way, and then I can go ahead and begin the riveting. As you'll notice, also at the rib locations where the attach angles will go, I still have number 832 screws. I hold them in place with some simple wing nuts. Put some washers underneath to keep from sort of scratching up the aluminum cap strips. For what I'm going to be doing for riveting, I like to use back riveting. And it makes a really easy, nice job when you're doing it by yourself. So I'm using a simple back riveting set. This may have been from Avery or Aircraft Tool Supply. I may have got it from Aircraft Spruce. I'm not exactly sure. This is a short one. Also have a long one. I'm using a 4X gun. It's set up to about 80 psi. You'll need at least a 3X gun to do these number 5 rivets. For the so using the rivet gun with the back set rivet to actually do the shop head side. To do the round head side of the rivet, I'm using a simple rivet die, and I'm putting in this piece of steel I have. It's about a 1-inch piece of steel, weighs about 7 pounds or so. Got it on some blocks of wood just to space it up to be the right height for my spar, and I'll place this underneath. What I've done for the riveting, I've already done a few rivets so far, pretty much following some of the plans and some of the suggestions from the guide to keep this going straight. I started by bucking a few rivets in the center, and then I've moved to each edge, and then I'm going to start splitting it. I'm splitting it here in the center, and I'll split up over on that side. I'll keep splitting it up until I've at least got some of the a few of the rivets done in between each of the bays, probably about half of the rivets in each of the bays between each of the ribs, and then I'll go back and finish up the riveting. What I've also done is I got a piece, as you see here, a piece of Dacron fishing line, and at each end I've got it attached, and I've got marks where the center is on the center of it and on each end to make sure I don't get any twist in this as I'm going along. I've just got it clamped on the edge, held on with a weight, and it seems to work pretty well. So I'll go ahead and show you a little bit about the riveting here. The goal of it is, as you're riveting, you want to get the head here, the shop head. If you see a go no go gauge, these are kind of good. You can make one. They're pretty easy to make, or you can buy them for a few bucks. And what it really is, it shows you the minimum dimensions that you may want. You can always be a little bigger than both of these, but you don't want to be below this. So on the height of here, you can use a gauge, and you typically want to be about 2D high. And to look at this, you can use a little gauge here in showing it, and it's pretty close to 2D. The next size rivet would make it higher, and what I did a few sample pieces to make sure I got enough of the rivet size. And then when you buck it down, you want to make sure that the height of it is no shorter than this here. It could be a little higher. And you want the head to be no smaller than this hole. It can be a little bit larger. So if your head's a little bit larger and your height's a little bit higher, that's okay, but you don't want either of those below that dimension. And that will be fine. And so you can kind of see which size rivet we'll do. Will the slightly undersized rivet here, that's about probably about 1/8 of a D less than the optimum height, or do you want the higher one? If you get a higher rivet, that's always better, but it's a lot easier to bend over the rivet. So I go with the one that will satisfy the dimensions I have here, and everything's going pretty good. So what we'll do is we'll place this in place. Make sure it's underneath here. It's setting very nicely. It's setting inside the dime underneath. I've got this in place. Take the rivet gun, get it nice and straight. I usually hold my fingers, even if one of these is more from other types of rivets too. Give it about a few second blast. And that looks pretty good. Check the height. Perfect height. Holes not too small. So that's a perfect rivet there. I'll go ahead and rivet one on the other side, and I'll keep moving along. So simply rivet the other side. I simply move this across, get it inside the die, and again, just give it a short burst. And again, perfect size rivet. And I'll continue this on the whole spar until I had it finished, periodically checking to make sure that I'm not getting the spar out of straight. And we'll move on to the next step after this. Now folks, what I'm going to show here is how I attach my spacers to the main rib and how I do the fitting of that. So I've got my 2 match drilled spacers I have now. And so I'm going to take one, and I've actually already drilled this, but I'm going to show you exactly what I have done. And so I'm going to take one of them that's the top, and what I have it marked is I have B and A. And B is going on the rear side, and A is going on the front side. And I always have them so they're facing up this direction. So that's just my normal convention on how I label these at this point. So I've got the A one here, and what I'm going to do is align this so I'm getting it perfectly aligned down the center. So I start off by lining it up with a piece of a rib actually here, and I'll use one of the attached ribs that I have, and I mark the center line. And so I'm setting this up so my spacer will be right in the middle. I'm using my little square that I made earlier that fits nicely between the rib, and I'm setting it up here so the holes are all lined up nicely. I'm going to do it so then it's nice and square going up and down, and the holes are pretty much splitting down the center of these holes. So I've got one set, and I'll go ahead and drill the bottom hole here. Once I got the bottom hole set, I'll go ahead and put in a cleco, and I'm using long reach clecos here that will go all the way through a 1/2 inch of material. So I've set the bottom cleco, and then I'm going to come in and get this thing perfectly square. It's got it nice and square. I'll drill the top hole, and then I'll place the top cleco, and then I'll go ahead and drill the center hole. And now I'm going to place the rear attached piece on the back side. So we'll come in here, get it lined up on the holes, do the clecos so it pulls it up tight. And so I've now got the 2 spacers clecoed in place. They're nice and square. They're nice center, all lined up on the center of the hole. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to match drill this and drill through the whole piece with a number 30 drill bit. I started off by drilling with a number 40, and I'm going to drill it to its final size for the number 4 rivets with another number 30 drill bit. And what I'm going to do now that I'm drilling a little thicker is I'm going to put a clamp in place. Get a little more tightness on it. Put a clamp in place, and we'll drill the first hole. I'm using my air drill with the bubble, excuse me, the bubble level. Do a nice hole. We'll now place a copper cleco in the center of it, and we'll come down here and drill the next hole. Take out the silver cleco. Go back with the drill, nice and centered. Cleco this hole. And now move across to do the final hole over here. Clamps do a pretty good job of holding everything together, and it's pretty quick using the vice grip clamps. And we have it all clecoed in place. And from here we can continue on down the line doing the rest of them, and then we'll come back and match drill the angles brackets to this, and that will show that part next. Okay, now I'm going to show you how I go about attaching my angle attach for the ribs for the front and the rear of the main spar. So I have the spacer blocks put in place. I've cut them, primed them, and they're in place right now. They're pinned in place and held with a cleco. I've also pre-drilled the angle attach, and I actually do one as a right and one as a left side. Basically so I can use the same plane of reference, and on setting these up, the same hole will be set here, and I'm going to check for square along the bottom. So I'll put these in place. And what I've done is I have not done a double flush rivet here. They're simply held in place with some clecos. I'll use some clamps and kind of hold them in place as I go along. I've mounted the spar vertically so it allows me to work from either side, and these pins don't fall out. So I'm going to start by removing this cleco. And then I'm going to hold this in place with a black cleco, and I'll simply push those other rivets back in their holes. Sometimes easier said than done. Okay. I'm going to push in position, adjust the back plate. Okay, they're adjusted in. Now I'm going to check for square. I've made a simple little jig. I'm always referencing it across based on the same piece. So I'm referencing from the bottom cap strip. Simply allows me to do a square, simply a piece of 9/16 inch acrylic with a little face on it to give me a perfect square here, and I can hold it up against the edge. So I take this, hold it in place, hold that angle piece good and tight, take a vice lock pliers here, kind of hold it in place. And what I've also done, if you remembered, I still have it pinned from the back with some number 4 rivets going through the holes, but they're pushed back a little bit, so they're not sort of interfering, but they're holding these spacer blocks sort of in position. This is held in position now, and now I can simply drill from behind with my number 21 drill bit. And I'll put another cleco in place at the top to hold this. Now I can drill the centers. I'll come ahead down here and move the pliers to hold it in place. And I use the drill to drill the number 30 drill bit. Put the copper cleco in. I'll remove one of the pins. Kind of hold this a little bit in place. I'll remove one of my pin rivets that I have right here, and I'll drill from the back for the second one. I'll put the pin back in place. See it come through. And I'll drill the second one down here. Hitting just a little bit on this clamp. I'm going to go ahead and remove the clamp here. You can also back it up with a piece of wood. Keep it from pushing away quite as easy. And so now I have this piece drilled. What I'll now do is mark this one, take it off, and repeat the same process on the other side. Deburr, prime, and then rivet these in place. Okay, everybody, we're back to the next stage of how I laid up my spars and have riveted the cross pieces on. On some of the earlier ones I showed on fitting a lot of the cross pieces and the angle brackets and so on. And this time I'm going to show what I do on riveting the angles and the spacer blocks onto the rear part of the spar here and the front part of the spar. So I've already gone through and been up and pre-drilled and all of my angle pieces and my spacer pieces. and now I'm going to go about riveting them. One of the problems when you're riveting here with multiple layers, particularly when you're using 2 of this on one side and a 1/4 inch or a piece, and then the thin 032 or 025 aluminum, is it tends to, the rivet wants to swell in between as it's going in. It wants to swell a little bit here, and it can cause a separation between your aluminum piece here a little bit and the spacer pieces. And so there's a bunch of techniques on doing this, but I'll show you one of the techniques that I use. So I'm going to go ahead here and go ahead and fit this in place. So I've got the angle attached bracket on the front side, and I'm going to go ahead and attach it with a few Clecos. We'll go ahead and put the rear spacer bar in, and I kind of line them with a couple of rivets that I put through the holes. I find it makes it a little bit easier for this. It's not always how you'll do it, but for these pieces this works pretty well when you can get them lined up. So I'm lined up here, put the top piece in, click this in place, hold it in place. Do a finagling. May have to touch this just a touch with the drill to get them through, maybe not. Touch up the center one just a tad with the drill bit. So it's not quite so tight. Okay, the next thing that I do is I'm taking some 1/8 inch neoprene here. Pretty stiff neoprene that I was able to pick up at the local hardware store, and I cut out some small donuts. And the 1/8 inch here is about, or this may be maybe a little bit thicker than 1/8 inch. This may be 3/16. But it's about the size that I need for the extending out of the number 4 rivets. So it's about the same thickness here as the number 4 rivets. And what this will do is when I place it here on the back side, it's going to hold the rivet in place. And I'll kind of show, I'm going to kind of zoom in here now to come in close here to show you a little bit of what this is doing. So now we're zoomed in close to this attach angle, and I've got my the donut I cut out. So I'd first of all put a hole in the center, so it will at least stay on the rivet with a leather punch, and then just cut it out with a pair of scissors. And I'm going to place this over the rivet here, and you see the rivet pretty much comes through, but it kind of holds it in place. What's going to happen now, as I drive this in with a rivet gun and a bucking bar, the bucking bar is going to push on the rubber as it goes in slightly. It's going to hold all the pieces together and clamp it together pretty tightly, so I don't get any spacing there as the rivet starts to swell. Once I allow the rivet to swell a little bit, it's going to lock everything into place. I can take this donut off and finish up the riveting. So it's now, as you can see, it's swelled. Everything's nice and tight. And I can finish it up. And I'll do the same on the bottom one. Tap this into place. Put it in to set it, hold it tight. Drive in the rivet, and we'll do the top one. Center rivet I did drive just a tad bit further than I would have liked to, but it's fine for this one. So very nice. Now it's set all of those rivets, and I can continue moving on to the rest of them.